The Panthers get a win in Sergei Bobrovsky's return to the lineup. Matthew Tkachuk stays hot, and Paul Maurice, now the winningest head coach in Florida Panthers history.
You're Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into this Monday, December 9th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez. You can follow me on X and Blue Sky at MondoMan12. Follow the show account on X and Instagram at LO_FLA Panthers, and on Blue Sky at LOFLA Panthers. No underscore there. And shout out to the everydayers who come back here and get your daily Florida Panthers fix. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. And you could do that all on Game Time. So, Florida Panther fans, grateful to be back here once again here on the show to discuss everything in the world of the Florida Panthers, as the Panthers had a quick one-game homestand, if you want to call it that, for them. And we spoke about how this was a big 2 points for the Cats right before a long Western Canadian trip that includes Minnesota and Seattle in the trip there. And it's not going to be easy whatsoever for the Florida Panthers. And hey, the Florida Panthers find themselves now at the top of the Atlantic Division now that Toronto lost 2 straight games in regulation for them. So this is great for the Florida Panthers and how hot they've been recently, losing 6 of 7 and then responding with 5-0-1 on a 6-game point streak now for them. And Matthew Tkachuk being the star once again in Saturday night's win for them. And now 15 points in the last 5 games, averaging 3 points a game there, and really impactful on this one for Chucky, as he got a 2-point game. And even on the Barkov goal, the power play goal for Sasha Barkov towards the end of the second period, he kept the puck into the zone, and we saw really the stick skills on display for Matthew Tkachuk, batting it two times in the towards the right part of the offensive zone, and then feeding it to Verhaeghe, and then the nice little chef's kiss touch pass too from Reinhart to Alexander Barkov on the sharp angle shot for them to get it on the power play there. But once again, display of hands for Matthew Tkachuk there, and also the fact that the Panthers were able to really capitalize really early in the game, 23 seconds in off a turnover from Jake Wallman that found Sam Bennett, and then a redirection and then batting the puck past Mackenzie Blackwood for the first one for Matthew Tkachuk, and then Matthew Tkachuk after Tomáš Nosek created the turnover off of the San Jose Sharks, he was able to get to create the chance and score for the Panthers. So 2 goals for Matthew Tkachuk. He continues to stay hot for the Florida Panthers, and stars of the week haven't been announced yet, at least to my knowledge, but there's no debate on who the first star of the week is going to be. And then Sam Bennett continuing to drive play for the Florida Panthers as part of the gaining the zone and also getting the pucks in deep, and then just continuing to battle on the forecheck. And then just as Jameson Olive likes to post every game for the Panthers on the dog play of the game, that dog play of the game for Sam Bennett on just that hit on Ty Dellandrea, that his momentum was going forward and jumping up, and then his momentum carried him to the ice where Mario Ferraro wasn't so pleased with that one, and then both of them going to the box for roughing there for this one. So just really Sam Bennett being a menace once again for him, and then it's crazy with that hit on Dellandrea. Ty Dellandrea and Matthew Tkachuk even were having a hard time getting separated towards the benches in the early parts of the game after they were tangled. The linesmen, it took like 15 seconds to separate them right before they went on a change. But the Panthers just continued to frustrate the opposition over and over again for them, and just their hard style of play. And once again, this is a style that's really hard to play for 60 minutes, 82 times a year. But the Panthers doing it against a team that's still trying to get out of the basement in the San Jose Sharks. It's really going into this one to just two different timelines for them. The Panthers coming off a Stanley Cup, the San Jose Sharks just getting the number 1 overall pick, which I was still very highly impressed by Macklin Celebrini. We didn't mention this when we previewed the matchup on Macklin Celebrini and just the high percentage of board battles that he wins for his young career at 18 years old. So just I don't want to make too much of one game for Macklin Celebrini, even though he had 5 shots on goal on just the Panthers' ability to contain him. So he's going to be a star in this league. And Sergei Bobrovsky, #DadBob, protected well in this one. He spoke about after the game how he felt the love from the family that is in the locker room, the fans, and he's grateful to have family both at home and at the rink. But even Sergei Bobrovsky protected well, didn't face a lot of shots early on, but then even on the PK after he mishandled the puck, making it up with 2 big leg saves for him, and just dialed in, and now getting win number 408 to go to 11th all time, and still a bit away from getting into the top 10, 16 to be exact, from tying Tony Esposito there. But the Panthers, it wasn't a letdown, thankfully, for them. They're at home. The San Jose Sharks, are on a 11-game losing streak against the Panthers, even going back to pre-COVID and everything, because they didn't face off against each other in the 2021 season. So it's a big, long drought that the San Jose Sharks are on against these Florida Panthers. But I mean, the Panthers also eliminated the rush chances against for them, and that was the big key to victory on Saturday. And the big rush chance against was actually when the Panthers were on the power play in the third period from Luke Cunnin, Matthew Tkachuk's longtime U.S. NTDP teammate. And even prior to that power play that the Panthers had, we thought that the San Jose Sharks were gonna score on when they were pushing it in the offensive zone, but high stick that hit Nico Mikkola negated that goal for the San Jose Sharks there. So a few opportunities, but for San Jose, but negated off of that penalty, and just once again the Panthers' ability to just disrupt while the San Jose Sharks were attempting breakout passes. As I mentioned earlier, Jake Wallman on that one, which is a big piece from the Detroit Red Wings that's lost this season. I mean, Detroit has had 2 defensemen go out the door that they could use on their roster for them. Philip Hronek is Quinn Hughes' defense mate over in Vancouver, and he's succeeding there on that top pair. And then Jake Wallman, who was Moritz Seider's pair there, and for salary cap reasons, and had to trade him in order to pay him and Lucas Raymond. But still a big piece lost in Detroit, but it might not say what Jake Wallman's value is for San Jose, as they're still trying to put pieces around Macklin Celebrini, Will Smith, and everything for the San Jose Sharks. And I'll add William Eklund there. But but credit to Mackenzie Blackwood. I mean, 53 shots against for him. The Panthers got a season high, which they're also 6 shots away from a franchise record, which was set a few years ago against the Ottawa Senators. But we didn't even know it was a franchise record until after the game, because they didn't get the shots on goal correct until hours later. So we didn't know at the time that the game was over just a few years ago until then. But the Panthers D also getting involved in the play. I mean, there was one breakaway where Aaron Ekblad had a beautiful feed from Barkov, Carter Hagee, the ice vision there to drop it to Barkov as a Sharks player was drawing to him, and then Barkov finding Aaron Ekblad, and then Mackenzie Blackwood flashing the leather there. But 6 shots on goal for Gustav Forsling. Even had a chance on a breakaway after the Panthers went to the box for too many men on the ice, and then Matthew Tkachuk creating that play. It was more than just the points on the board for Matthew Tkachuk that he was creating. It's just when he's feeling it, and the fact that the guys stood up for each other in this one. I mean, I will say, after seeing the replay of Barkov colliding with Sergei Bobrovsky from Grundstrom, Kulikov pushed Grundstrom and then pushed Barkov into Sergei Bobrovsky. So I'm going to call it like I see it there. So, but hey, for thankfully, Sergei Bobrovsky was all right, but it did result in the Panthers going to the box after Grundstrom pinned Barkov and his head into the glass, which gladly you like to see Matthew Tkachuk standing up for him there for the Panthers and for his captain. So thankfully nobody got hurt, and that the Panthers were able to get a win, and just a few minutes away from a shutout, which I felt Sergei Bobrovsky deserved there. But hey, when you have 7 power plays for the opposition on the night, it's even the worst of teams, it's hard to go bat 1,000 on that one on the penalty kill. But still, the Panthers penalty kill was on it, not allowing Sergei Bobrovsky to see through screens and everything for him. And for the Panthers, and this one, 37 total minutes of 5-on-5 only for this one. And after the second period, they had more shots on goal than the San Jose Sharks had total shot attempts. So just two different types of teams that you saw on the ice on Saturday night for both the Florida Panthers and the San Jose Sharks. But hey, the Panthers 2 points and 2 points ahead of the Atlantic Division lead. So big 2 points for them. But coming up in segment number 2, we are going to discuss more about Paul Maurice and getting win number 111 in the regular season for the Florida Panthers, and a discussion more of the state of coaching and the state of teams trying to contend and getting out of the basement, and how fortunate the Florida Panthers are in this cycle of their history. We're going to discuss that more next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Mint Mobile. And I love a great deal as much as the next guy, but I'm not going to crawl through a bed of hot deals just to save a few bucks. It has to be easy. No hoops, no BS. So when Mint Mobile says it's easy to get wireless for $15 a month with the purchase of a 3-month plan, I call them on it. Turns out it really is that easy to get wireless for $15 a month. The longest part of the process was the time I spent waiting to break up with my old provider. To get started, go to mintmobile.com/lockedonNHL. There you'll see that right now 3-month plans are only $15 a month, including the unlimited plan. Find out how easy it is to switch to Mint Mobile and get it 3 months of premium wireless service for $15 a month. To get this new customer offer on your new 3-month premium wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/lockedonNHL. That's mintmobile.com/lockedonNHL. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/lockedonNHL. $45 upfront payment required. New customers get 3-month plan only. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details. Also, this episode is brought to you by Game Time. And Game Time has a new feature called the Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your live events even easier. And the Game Time curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concert, comedy, theater, and more. Toggle of this feature shows up the total upfront with no surprise fees at checkout. Get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy, and the lowest price guarantee, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Download the app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON NHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. And once again, I'd like to thank you guys for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day here on a Monday edition of the show. Just me today discussing everything in the world of the Florida Panthers. And for Paul Maurice, 111 wins for him. And this is season 3 for Mo. Crazy to think that 31 years of Florida Panthers hockey. Before you look it up, you want to guess how many head coaches the Florida Panthers have had total? Head coaches and interim? 18. 18 head coaches. And the longest tenured coaches right before Paul Maurice, is, as far as total games, happened to be back-to-back in Jacques Martin and Pete DeBoer, who had 3 full seasons. No in-season hirings, no in-season firings for either of them for their time with the Florida Panthers. And Paul Maurice doing this in 50 less games than Jacques Martin in getting to 111 wins for him. And when you think about this accomplishment for Paul Maurice, getting it in his fourth head coaching job for him, if you want to count Carolina, if you want to put it 5, Carolina twice for him, and just the opportunity that was there for him to begin with, it's mutual when it comes to the success of someone in previous stops or the lack thereof. When a lot of people talk about regular season losses for Paul Maurice and then coming to a situation where it has to be, you have to also set up the coach to succeed, which also indicates. And when you talk about the state of the league right now, there's a lot of impatience that's going on with roster building. Paul Maurice is the 10th longest tenured head coach currently in the NHL. And he was hired on June 22nd, 2022. A month later, Matthew Tkachuk was traded to the Florida Panthers. So crazy what's happened from there to now, as the Panthers are on their way to hopefully compete for another Stanley Cup championship for them. But you think of also the state of roster building for the NHL on how easy a teardown is, but how much harder it is to bring it back up. And even for guys like Sasha Barkov, Aaron Ekblad, who went through so many different head coaches for them, and then getting to this point, it really goes to show when it comes to the state of the league, how hard this truly is. And when fans preach tank the season to try to get a better pick, it's like a be careful what you wish for when it comes to going into rebuild mode, which you see the Winnipeg Jets not going full scorched earth rebuild because they see what's going on in the league. And you hope that when the Panthers get to the point of 30-30, when Barkov, Tkachuk's contract ends, the clauses on Reinhart's, Forsling's, Verhaeghe's contracts go from no move clause to no trade. You hope that doesn't result in scorched earth, that if the play declines for either of these guys, that you can get moved for a valuable asset or something or NHL ready player for the Panthers there, because these guys are eventually going to hit their 30s. A good majority of them will very soon. And for the Panthers and getting to this point and how long it took, but also when it comes to the standings for the Panthers and the entire Atlantic Division, it's always the same 4 teams: Boston, Tampa, Toronto, Florida. And if you look at it right now, it's the same 4 teams at the bottom. How many times have we asked that question? Who's going to take that next step in the Atlantic to go to knock off a Boston, which Boston, although they're 7-2-0 under Joe Sacco, their interim head coach, this could still be the year that they drop off, or they could barely squeak in the wild card. Tampa Bay has the better points percentage at this point in time. But it just goes to show that when you're up, you're up. And there's like a 4 to 5 year window where you're staying up. But also there's that 4 to 5 year window where you're staying down. And we're going to see that with the San Jose Sharks for a little while before they contend. And then you see different situations across the league, like Luke Richardson being fired when I didn't think he really deserved to in this early in the season, with how poor the roster construction is for Chicago, and then shifting Connor Bedard to the wing, not winning his faceoffs and all that. You see Anaheim, they're taking a long time to build their roster. I mean, likely John Gibson is going to be a goalie that people are going to probably go after. Maybe Colorado goes after him. But Lucas Dolstall, he's a bright spot on Anaheim, where he's getting peppered with shots over and over and over again. He's a bright spot there. At least they have that to build. Same thing with Montreal and Sam Montembeault, claimed off of waivers from Florida. The Montreal Canadiens consistently get pinned in their own end. There's still a building block there, thankfully. And there are certain coaches that might be set up to fail in different situations for the NHL. I'm very concerned for Ryan Warsofsky, the Sharks head coach, who coached Gustav Forsling and Etu Lustaran in Charlotte when they were still under the Carolina affiliate. I'm worried about those guys. We don't have to worry about Paul Maurice. By the time, and it's the thing, because Pete DeBoer and Jacques Martin both got 3 full seasons, the math is easy that game 1 of 25-26 will be the milestone mark of the most coached games regular season in Florida Panthers history. Paul Maurice already has the most postseason wins in Florida Panthers history, and he only has 2 postseasons under his belt. Just goes to show the poor history that the Panthers had prior to this, and everything in between. And also how coaches get the wrong end of the stick when it's poor roster builds. Once again, like Boston right now, who we mentioned earlier with 7-2-0 under Joe Sacco, but with the poor start with Jeremy Swayman with the contract situation, and then Jim Montgomery being let go, and then St. Louis picking him up just 5 days later, which Boston has had 3 consecutive head coaches that they've let go and they get hired in less than 8 days. Crazy how it all happens just like that. And also, when it comes to Don Sweeney and how he's built his roster without going scorched earth rebuild, with an Elias Lindholm who might be a second-line center instead of a first-line center, Nikita Zadorov, we said it from the start of the offseason that could age very poorly. And right now, it's not even aging well in year 1 of that deal. And one person that could be a victim of poor roster management, which this team has also had poor lottery luck. They picked 6 overall, 3 different drafts for them. Derek Lalonde of the Detroit Red Wings. He could have the short end of the stick in Detroit, which apparently former Panthers head coach Joel Quenneville is linked to that job in Detroit from latest reports. So that's something to look out for. But you need the right ingredients for your franchise and the way it's set up. And thankfully for the Panthers, it's been such a perfect marriage for Paul Maurice wanting to still having that fire to coach, Bill Zito putting them in a position where you go after a player like Matthew Tkachuk who fits Paul Maurice's identity on what he wants a team to perform. Having a Vezina Trophy winner in Sergei Bobrovsky 2-time, even though it wasn't Zito's signing, but you know what I mean there, knowing what's on your roster and putting the coach and giving them the proper ingredients. Gotta give it to both Paul Maurice and Bill Zito for making this happen for the Panthers and just getting them to this point where now it's 111 wins. And we're talking early December of his 3rd season as the bench boss for the Cats. So, and the thing is, for Florida and just their 18 head coaches, three of their 18, their only jobs were with the Florida Panthers. Dwayne Sutter, Kevin Dineen, who was recently fired from Utica, and then Tom Rowe. But then all of those hires for the first-time hires for the Florida Panthers behind the bench, they're in and around playoff appearances. So Dwayne Sutter was inserted shortly after the Panthers got swept by the Devils. Kevin Dineen was the coach for the Panthers when it was a down year for Tampa Bay and Washington. And then Tom Rowe the year after 2016, where they won the Atlantic and that heartbreaker against the New York Islanders. And then the Huberdeau injury didn't help the Panthers there. The arguments consistently between Gerard Gallant and management, which we know that picture from the taxi for them. But it's so crazy how 3 of the 18 coaches, their one chance what was around when the Panthers were just maybe scratching the surface for getting in. But at the same time, there's something that Ryan Lichtenstadter and Matt Lichtenstadter, excuse me, I said Ryan, sorry, uh, and I spoke about was all those other times outside of these last 4 years that the Panthers have entered the playoffs, they weren't taken seriously as a contender. So it also goes to show what when you take chances in big trades, like after the Panthers already traded 3 first-round picks in prior to Matthew Tkachuk and then trading another one, it just goes to show what boldness can do. Can it bite you? We thought it did at the 2022 trade deadline and then getting swept by Tampa Bay. But making up for it after, I thought it was, once again, I thought it was a risk for the Panthers getting Matthew Tkachuk there at the time. But again, it changed the identity. That's the word, identity for the Florida Panthers and getting them to this point. And it's resulted in Paul Maurice getting to 111 wins, and he's going to maybe double, triple those wins and maybe even games coach because he's still relatively young. So for when he started coaching in his late 20s and still aging like fine wine for him as he's continuing to just have that fire and that passion to coach for the Cats here in 2024-25. But in segment number 3, we are going to transition over to the Board of Governors meeting that's going on this week in South Florida. We are going to talk about that more next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. And get ready to take on the NFL action with America's #1 sportsbook, FanDuel. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place bets on the NFL, all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Third and final segment here on this Monday, December 9th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day here on a Monday. So the Board of Governors meeting is this week in South Florida, Palm Beach County, Monday and Tuesday. So the meetings always go on here, but it's great to know that it's coming to our region, knowing that the Panthers are coming off a Stanley Cup championship. And hey, it just goes to show the desire for the NHL and being here now in different parts of the year. And hey, an all-star game here recently, a draft less than 10 years ago. So when it comes to building the league and trying to expand to different parts, which is the focus of the NHL, is the growth of it in the United States, which Canada will already have a whole bunch of their fair share of fans who will tune in. And speaking of, part of the agenda for the Board of Governors meeting is the new Canadian TV deal, which the current deal ends in 2026. So one of them will be one of the questions that Pierre LeBrun put in his article for The Athletic is the streaming services that could be involved more with the NHL. And we already have a nationally televised game every Monday on Amazon and a Thursday coast to coast that Adnan Virk host there, which I would love for ESPN to pick up that in the United States so that we could also get our version of Hockey Red Zone on Thursday nights. We love it for football, but we also want to see it in hockey without having a 16-game slate once a year where the last puck drop is at 11 p.m. on a school night / work night. So would love to see more often, but it doesn't need to be the whole the whole start times in 15-minute intervals all the way until 11 p.m. Well, starting at 11 p.m. and then ending around like 1:30 in the morning and beyond for that. But other things that are going to be on the agenda for it is the CBA update, which is set to expire in September of 2026. Salary cap right now projected to 92.5. Elliot Freeman spoke about how it could be up to 95, which still leaves us to question if it's going to get up to 95. That could be good news for the Panthers and their pursuit of re-signing Sam Bennett and Aaron Ekblad. The only reports that we've heard is their pursuit of Sam Bennett, which, when you think about Sam Bennett recently, and just if you get 3 top centers in your top 9, where even though we are confident that Anton Lundell can take that next step to the 2C, if you have 3 centers who could drive play for the Panthers, you are continuing your championship window, which if it's 92.5 and nothing beyond that, you could only re-sign one of Ekblad and Bennett, in my opinion, unless you make some type of trade. Like we spoke about Erod, Etuus-Thranen, which we won't know the salary cap projection until around the Stanley Cup final. That's when we'll know the official. Also, although we've had a conversation of the NHL going to the Olympics, there's still no official Olympic agreement, weirdly. But Pierre LeBrun said that there's no worry that they'll get something done, but it's not officially set in stone. It's unofficial as of now. But with Four Nations, they're going to be waiting on a report from Four Nations to see whether they're going to officially ink that deal. Another one is an 84-game season, which the schedule makes sense as far as Western Conference opponents, facing them twice a year, outside of your division, facing them each 3 times a year. But once again, of your 7 divisional rivals, 5 of them you faced them 4 times, and then 2 of them you faced them 3, which I always forget the rotation of who the Panthers will face 3 times next year in the Atlantic. I look at it when the schedule comes out. I'm like, oh, this is the year where Panthers and Senators will play 3 times instead of 4. So that one is, I don't necessarily keep up with that one until the schedule officially comes out. Also, there's a possibility of the Stanley Cup final ending earlier, which we enjoyed the championship. But what I did not enjoy was the quick turnaround from championship award show, which there's not going to be an award show this year, to parade, free agency. It was all happening at once instead of spread out, which this is something we would like to see. And I'm sure other fan bases, if they win a championship, would like to see that as well. So that's another thing on the agenda for the Board of Governors meeting. And then later on, we will know some of the updates and what is to come from the Board of Governors meeting, but nothing will officially be set in stone after. There's probably going to be another meeting later on to discuss more of the topics, and none of them actually feature expansion. So for the time being, looks like it's going to stay at 32 teams, which we've seen interest from Atlanta, Houston, which is still hard to believe that Houston does not have the 4 major sports, all 4. And then Arizona, which they never should have lost a hockey team to begin with, in my opinion. So, but that's going to do it for today's edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. On tomorrow's edition of the show, we are going to preview tomorrow's Florida Panthers versus Seattle Kraken matchup, as the Florida Panthers will start their West Coast swing. So get your coffee ready, because it is a late night with the Cats for the next week and a half there. But come back tomorrow and we'll discuss more, as it could be a really difficult trip, but an opportunity for the Panthers to still continue on and to build their lead in the Atlantic Division. But in the meantime, if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast to be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Don't forget to also subscribe to the other shows on the Locked On NHL network, including Locked On NHL, Locked On Fantasy Hockey, Flip Livingstone and Steel Roden, and Locked On NHL Prospects. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. So I'm Armando Velez, signing off. And you've been listening to Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day.